Hey, it's Chris. How's it going? Today, I wanted to talk to you about your home studio. So I don't work in home studios anymore. I did it one time and then moved on to kind of bigger, more professional studios. And now I work in my virtual studio called sundownsessionstudio.com. And we record people from all over the world, but it's all done virtually. Now, a lot of you record tracks at home. So I thought, who could I get? What expert could I get to interview to give you guys the top sort of tips and tricks in how to get world-class tracks at home? So if you've ever been online and you've done any research at all into, looking for new studio gear or, better mixing tricks or better recording tips, it's hard to avoid Graham Cochrane from Recording Revolution. So I thought, I wonder if I could get Graham to sit down for an interview. So I bugged him and we pushed the interview a couple of times. He's a super busy guy, but I'm very pleased to say that he agreed to sit down and do an interview with me and really kind of parlay some of the stuff that he uses all the time to get amazing tracks at home. So let's just move on to the interview. No sense of me yakking about it right now. Check it out. I hope you enjoy it. So, hey, Graham, I like to ask this of sort of everybody I interview, sort of how did you get into music? And this is even before recording, maybe you had experience as a child or whatever in music before you got into Recording Revolution and everything that you're doing right now. How did you get into music to begin with?
Yeah, it's my dad. He got me into it. So he was a trumpet player, and then really he became a professional singer. So he was kind of classically trained, choral groups, opera. And so we grew up going to see him perform the classic music. And then when we'd come home, also, he loved every kind of music. So we would sit down and he would put records on. This is how he educated me. We'd play a record. So it would be, Handel's Messiah, or it would be Pat Metheny, or it would be Jimi Hendrix, or it would be, The Doors, and so we would just kind of go through everything that he loved. And then even growing up, because I'm a product of the 90s, so I love grunge music, but even my dad would put on Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam. He was into those bands before I was. And he's like, this is what's cool right now. This is good. This is good, and not the hair bands. That's what he would just say. It's better. So he really kind of just opened my ears and my eyes to different kinds of music. And Stevie Wonder, we would just listen to songs in the key of life, everything. So that got me into music. I started realizing I could sing at an early age. So my parents encouraged that. And I sang in, the school Christmas performances and stuff. And then I played trumpet and band and it helped me learn music, which was good. So I have a little bit of okay, I have to play with a band and read sheet music. But I wanted to just make my own songs. So in middle school, we made a little band like everyone did. And the whole idea was everyone had an instrument and they made me the singer. Graham, you just be the singer. And I thought that was the dumbest thing because I didn't want to just stand there and not have an instrument. So I felt real naked. So I was I got to learn an instrument that I can play and sing at the same time. So it's either keyboard or guitar or bass or something. I just said, I just want to learn guitar and taught myself guitar. Got all the tab books I could buy for Soundgarden, Stone Temple Pilots, all those bands, and just Green Day, try to figure out how to play. So a lot of power chords. And just, I realized I love performing. I love writing. I love, playing with a band and creating the arrangement. Okay, now we'll drop to just the bass and the drums. I liked all those elements. And then over time, when we started to get in the studio a little bit and we ended up buying some of our own equipment as a band in high school, fiddling with the equipment, I wasn't really a technical guy, but I fell in love with a multi-track recorder. I had an old Korg, D8, a digital hard disk recorder, and realizing that's another art form, just being able to layer tracks and experiment and songwrite with a machine and try out a harmony or try out a lead guitar part on top of my chords. All that was mind blowing to me in the 90s, right? So all of that was just, that love for music turned into just seeing all the different elements of music for me, and I loved all of it.
Amazing. And so obviously the segue there, right? So you started off with this, layering stuff on a Korg. How did that lead into what you're doing now? And in between, why didn't you decide, if you got fascinated with recording, why didn't you pursue the traditional studio path where you go into commercial studio, get a job there as a T-boy or whatever, and move on up?
Well, because I did. So I did that first. I went to audio school and got my degree, and then went to intern at a really big studio in Virginia where I was at the time. And I swept the floors, made the coffee and the tea, rolled up the Xbox controller cables, like I did all that stuff. And then, taking pictures of the knobs and filling in all the gear settings and cleaning the SSL. So I did all the stupid stuff. And with a lot of other interns fighting for that one paid position that they were offering. And that was going to be my thing after school. And being in those sessions, so there was like a 6-month period of time where I was interning at that studio, and I loved being there. But I started to realize, I was looking at the guys whose jobs I wanted, and I realized these guys are stressed out all the time. The way they talked about the bands and the music I don't know how they felt inside. I'm sure they love music. Otherwise they wouldn't have been there, but it was just a business like any other business. It was just the pressure to get the bands in, make sure that they're happy, get the tracks they wanted. And it was stress city. And I looked at them and I said, this isn't fun. Like what's fun is being back in my apartment with my inbox and my laptop and playing around in Pro Tools and making a track. Maybe it sucks, maybe it's good, but it was fun. And so I just said, why can't I just go freelance? If I can find bands and artists that don't care that they're coming to Graham's apartment, if they can listen to my portfolio and say, wow, I mean, it's in an apartment, but he made that record. It sounds good. I know it's going to eliminate a bunch of people that want to be in a nice $5 million studio. But what if I could find some people that like the result and like the chill, like my wife's pouring you coffee and you're getting to know me and my family and we're hanging out and we're making a record. Maybe they're like me. Maybe I could make a living doing freelance and I can do whatever I want. And that was more of what the light bulb was for me.
When did it become sort of apparent that, so you said you went to do it for fun, you started to do that. Was there at any point where you thought, hey man, this is not just going to be some little cottage industry of Graham sitting in his little home studio, where home studios were starting to become a thing, where like more and more people were doing it, more records were coming out of basements and bedrooms? When did that sort of occur to you? And then did that sort of lead to Recording Revolution, or how did that happen?
Yes, I mean, there's a combination of things. I wholeheartedly believed even back then, and I started my freelance work 2005, 2006. Back then, I felt like this is the future. I was like, it doesn't make any sense to have a massive studio in my mind at the time, even back then. And I thought more records are going to be made in either smaller studios or people's bedrooms, and then maybe finished in a small studio or a combination. So I wasn't even like hoping that or the trend would pick up. I was like, this is what's happening. So I thought I was cutting edge. But it was interesting because that was a time when still there was a lot of doubters. Still there was the people saying, if it came out of a home studio, it's a demo, and like we'll give you that. Yes, you can buy stuff and it can fit, but it's just a demo. And I was like out to make every record I made in my apartment sound like what I love. Like I love the records. All the records I love were made in big studios, back then. So I knew how they were made, and I was trying to like compete with that. And that was always the goal. But what was interesting is when my wife and we moved down to Tampa, to Florida in 2009 to help a buddy start a church. And so we just sold our stuff, left our jobs, moved down. And I was working a day job and freelance. I was doing both. I was double dipping. And so I was like, I'll do the same thing down here until I built up my client base in Florida. But I lost my job within 5 months of moving down here. And we had just bought our first house, had our first baby, and didn't know anybody except for my friends that moved down. And I needed to make money fast. So I'm trying to ramp up. I'm trying to call every client I've had. I was calling other producers that I knew all over the country who are friends of mine saying, hey, can you like outsource any of your vocal tuning, drum editing, anything you don't want to do? Like I'll do it. So try to piggyback off of their clients. And while I was trying to get as much work as possible, I had this like brilliant idea. I thought was brilliant was I don't know anybody in Tampa at the time, so it's going to take a while to get my name out there here. But what if I put some stuff on the internet, and show what I'm doing in the studio, pull up some sessions, show what I'm doing on the vocal chain or something, maybe share it on YouTube. Maybe people will go, oh, this guy's cool. He knows what he's doing. And then they could click on my link and they could check out my portfolio and hire me. That's what the Recording Revolution was supposed to be, was a vehicle to get more freelance work. And it ended up doing that. But what I couldn't have predicted, and that's why I tell people I didn't plan the Recording Revolution. I feel like God just sort of like gave me an opportunity to try something I didn't realize was going to be something, was what people really wanted, because it was this home studio revolution. They wanted to know how to do it themselves. Even people that became my clients ended up hiring me. Still, they were the type of DIYers. They were like, how do you make it sound like that? And as someone who went to audio school and had worked in a studio, like, even though I had that background, I'm not a very technical person. So I think the way I explained things in those early years, people were like, oh, I get this guy. He's speaking my language. He's a musician speaking to other musicians about how to use this stuff to get good music, which is all we wanted to do. They didn't want to be audio engineers. They just knew they could buy it, and it was more affordable than ever, and there was a way to use it to make a good song. So somehow, even in the early years, when the size of the audience was small and nobody knew my name or the business name, and I would walk around the NAM and nobody knew what Recording Revolution was, and I passed out business cards, the people that did find me, they were really hooked, and we had this cool community. So I knew there was something there. It wasn't a business. I didn't know how to make a living off of it, but I knew there was people that were hungry to learn how to do this.
Amazing story. That's so cool. And especially the thing I love about it most is like how it just sort of happened for you. You know, you didn't plan it. You just went to where you felt you were being drawn, and then it unfolded for you. So that's really cool. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see songwriters making recording at home?
There's so many.
A loaded question.
So, okay, a lot of the same mistakes, there were ones that I made. So one of them, if you're a songwriter, either you're performing the vocal just as a filler vocal, right? Or you actually are the vocalist. Vocals are really an easy place to tell if it's an amateur track or not. So even if you're a good vocalist, so let's just assume you are a singer and you're writing your own songs and you're killer vocalist. Because I understand if you're a songwriter and that's not your instrument. But they get a microphone, and I almost don't even matter what kind of microphone, but the way they use the microphone is wrong. So a lot of times we get super close to these microphones, and most of these microphones are cardioid patterns. So that means that they pick up primarily on the front, and there's this weird thing that happens. The closer you are to a cardioid microphone, you get this bass buildup. And it just makes things sound boomier, which could be really cool if you're doing the voiceover for a movie trailer, you know, and you want to sound beefier than you really are. So you get up on the microphone. But we're used to performing live with those dynamic microphones, and usually we eat the mic live. And so we do the same thing in the studio, and it just doesn't sound as natural. It actually sounds better when you back up 6 inches or back up a foot. But then you have other problems, because in your room, you get more of your room sound. But a lot of times in a track where you got a lot of cool instruments, even in a bad sounding room, I'd rather you be a foot away from the microphone and perform. You'll get a more even tone. It won't be bass heavy. And the other problem when you're close to the mic is something called the inverse square law. The closer you are to the mic, the more variance you have, or little variance with your mouth. So if you're actually a human that has emotion when you perform, those small variances make large volume changes when you're close to the mic. But if you're further back from the mic, those same head bobs don't make nearly as much of a volume difference. It's such a small not noticeable difference. So you get a more even volume and performance if you're back from the mic. So everything about your vocal sounds more natural. And so many people, because I listen to these tracks, you listen to these tracks, so many of these people, their vocals, they're either eating the microphone and it just sounds beefy, or the volume's all over the place, or when it comes to actually the production side of things, finishing up the song, they leave the vocal the way it is into the microphone. And vocals are super dynamic. They're loud and soft. Even if you're a good performer, you can have a ah sound and it's going to make more volume than a ooh sound. So it's not a naturally consistent instrument. So we need compression. Compression is the most helpful tool on a vocal to give you that more even upfront vocal sound that we're used to, where you can hear every single word on a screamo track, you know, where there's super loud guitars and drums, because it's been compressed. And that's a good thing if done well. So I feel like a lot of amateur tracks either overdo the compression because they hear it's a good idea and they squash it and kill it, or they're afraid of compression or don't know what compression is, so they don't do any compression, and it's You hear some words great, some get swallowed. So I feel like those are some big mistakes with amateur tracks, and you notice it a lot in the vocal.
Right. And of course, in this interview, you cannot get into everything that all the mistakes people make. But, you've had thousands of people go through your courses. And so if you think about all the records that they've made, you've perhaps helped improve millions of records sonically, just based on that, which is amazing, and it's such an amazing resource to have out there. So, as you know, for licensing music, the production has to sound as good as everything else getting into TV and film, right? It's just a natural thing. It's just kind of the way it goes. So if there was kind of like one holistic thing that you could say that you're teaching now to help songwriters sort of get close to that sound or get, license capable, what would that be?
It's a great question. So I would give you two answers. The biggest thing you could do, part one, and the most important one, is to reference other professional mixes. So if you're licensing stuff for film or for a movie or a video game, I would pull in other examples of tracks that you're literally competing with that you already have in mind, because everyone already has something in mind. I want it to sound as good as X. But where I'm so surprised every time that most people, they stop there. They know what they want it to sound like, but they don't actually bring that song into their session or have a tool that allows them to A/B what they're literally producing and mixing right now and then instantly flip to that professional standard. They'd skip that step. And that's what I call referencing, where our memories are awful. Our sonic memories are awful. We think we know what that track sounds like. And you might know it like I know Soundgarden better than anybody, in the sense that those records, whether it's Super Unknown, I mean, that's probably more than any of the records I listen to over and over and over again. So I know every note, every lyric, and even that record, I couldn't really tell you how much reverb is on those drums. I'm like, well, I think it's pretty dry. No, I think it's pretty wet. I'll always be wrong. I can't really tell you where he panned the guitars or actually how loud the guitars are. I think I know, but if I played it, I'm like, wow, I didn't realize that lead guitar is way too loud. But that's the way it was. So we can't trust our memory. I think it's arrogant to mix without referencing, or foolish. At best, it's foolish. At worst, it's arrogant. So the best thing you could do is have a system in place. And I work in Pro Tools, but it can use any DAW that you like. I literally drag in. If I was working on a track that sounded like Linkin Park and I wanted it to sound like Linkin Park, I would bring in a Linkin Park track and I would literally have it in my session, and I would have it so I can flip back and forth between what I'm working on and instantly compare it. Now, the tip is you got to make sure that it's at the same volume, because if you're in the middle of production, you might not have a fully mastered version that's not quite as loud. So bring the volume down of the professional one so that you're not fooling yourself, or because we always like what sounds louder. But once you've got it at a similar level, when you flip back and forth, your brain instantly wakes up because our ears adjust. We lose perspective so quickly as an engineer. That's our biggest challenge. And so the best thing you can do is literally compare it in the instant. And what's great about that, for if you're working in a home studio, your room probably sucks. Like, it probably sounds awful, or it's not perfect. My room doesn't sound awful, but it's still not perfect. And that's okay. Everyone's working on different speakers. How do you know if your speakers are good? Well, it almost doesn't matter if you can pull in a reference, because then you know what that professional song sounds like on your speakers in your crappy room. And it tells you if that song has way more low end, you got to bring up your low end. If that song's vocal seems really buried and that's the vibe you're going for, then bury your vocal. If you like the width of that sonic space that they created, match that width. We all forget. So I think that's the most helpful tool. It's depressing when you do it, because you realize how much your stuff sucks compared to, but it shows you the benchmark, right? And what I hear from my perspective, and I don't know about yours, but my perspective is I get a lot of mixes from students that they don't do this. They might even think about it, might even know about it, might even heard me beat it into their heads, but they don't do it for a variety of reasons. Oh, I know what it sounds like. I know my room, or whatever. And they mix in isolation, which is what you're doing. You're mixing in isolation, and you make it sound good for you in that room, in that moment. But that's not where the rest of the world listens to your stuff. If you're going to sync it, it's going to be playing everywhere on every kind of system, right? So it has to sound good everywhere. And you don't mix for your room. You don't mix for yourself. You mix for what will translate. And the only way to know it, they send me a mix and I tell them, bro, you know that there's like no bass in your mix. I'm like, no, it's plenty of bass in my mix. In your room, it sounds like there's plenty of bass because your room has got too much bass. You would know that if you had a reference. So it's like the easiest hack to ensure you get better, because it at least will show you that you're not good enough. So you won't finish, and it gives you a benchmark. And so it's a habit. It doesn't actually do anything to your mix, but it gives you the best perspective you could possibly have.
Well, wasn't that amazing? So what an amazing set of tips and tricks and things to avoid, things to do to get your music into world-class shape. Thank you, Graham. That was amazing. So for those of you, some of you might be beginners and you picked up a lot from that interview. Some of you might be, total pros in your home studio and you didn't learn a lot. But regardless of that, I wanted to offer another sort of thing, and I asked Graham, do you have something else I can give you to check out? And he says, yes, I have a free webinar that I do that is basically the 5 fundamental steps to getting your music radio ready. Now, radio ready doesn't just mean getting it on the radio. It means getting it ready for sync. It means for shopping to labels, to publishers, to licensing agents. Whatever it is, it basically means getting your tracks to sound professional, completely professional, major label professional. So if you want to check out this totally free webinar and dive deeper in how to do it, just click the link below in the description below this video, right down here, and it'll take you straight there. It doesn't cost a thing, and it's the 5 critical things you need to do at home that you can absolutely do at home. They're totally actionable things you can do to get your music basically ready for radio and all of those other things that I just talked about. So thanks a lot, Graham. Really appreciate that. And once you've checked out the webinar, report back, leave a comment below this video if you wouldn't mind. I'd love to know what you thought of it, or leave some of your recording challenges, or like what kind of gear you use, or anything like that. And I love responding to comments all the time, so just leave something there, and if I can help by responding to you, I'd love to do that. So awesome. I hope that really helps improve your music at home. Go check out the webinar. It's in the link right below in the description here, and let me know what you thought. All right, we'll talk to you next time, and we'll see you later. Okay, bye-bye.